The farmers I'm visiting today have long been keen on sustainable agricultural practices, but it was their change to egg farming in early 2020 which kick-started their interest in Heytesbury's Climate Resilient Farms project.
My name is Adam Jenkins, and my wife Catherine Jenkins and I farm here with our 4 children at South Purrumbete. We traditionally ran dairy up until last year. We've been here for about 17 years, and we've changed our enterprise around significantly and now running beef cattle and agistment dairy cattle and free-range mobile chicken caravans for egg production. And we've sort of been looking at changing things. Part of the change for us was a lifestyle change, but also looking at changing the way we do things for the family, and also introducing the chickens into our enterprise was probably around the sustainability part of it, and also having an opportunity to selling a product that's close to your customers, which before that we didn't have the opportunity in dairy. You'd sell that as a commodity, and so the chickens has enabled us to build up a good customer base and have that interaction with our customers. So still producing things off the land, and having a good interaction with our market.
We've gone from running a conventional system, pasture-based farming system, fairly intensive farming system too, where fertiliser inputs were pretty high. We weren't that high for dairy. We were sort of average, if you like, but it's still a pretty intensive and high input system to run a pasture-based dairy farm. So from there, we don't use artificial fertilisers at all anymore, and I suppose it probably took a little while for us to notice a difference in the pasture and an improvement in the place, and certainly having the chickens roam around has helped that sort of regenerative boost, if you like, and help the place look a bit more alive. But a lot more clover coming back into the pasture now, which we did when we were re-sowing permanent pasture. We would put make sure there was clover in there, because we were always keen on seeing, the benefits of clover.
We saw the advertisement for the Heytesbury project in terms of around that whole climate change and sustainability and everything like that, and that's sort of something that appealed to Catherine and I, because we'd changed the way we've been doing things. Not saying other things are wrong, it's just for us, it just was what we wanted to do. So it was about getting involved in the project, meeting like-minded people, tapping into resources about getting some information and some things that we could do on farm, and also getting support to sort of try new things on farm as well. We know climate's changing, man-made or whatever it is, it doesn't matter, it's changing. It's changed a lot since we've been here, and this season in particular is testament to that. So we sort of decided to think about what's some of the things that we can put in place. I've travelled a lot overseas over the years, and seeing some of the regulation that came in around fertilisers and things like that. I'm thinking, all the fertilisers that we use are fantastic. Yep, they're good. But if we start regulating and things, where do we go? What do we do from that? We can't just cut off things. So I'm really open to that idea of, really exploring our soil's got so much nutrients in it as it has, naturally. How do we unlock that, and what's the species and things that we can start doing with our soil that benefits our chickens and our cattle, benefits the soil, and also contributes to, whether it's carbon offset or whatever it is, and it's helping the whole system. It allows us to have a facility where the chickens are safe from the environment, but also gives us the ability to move them around the paddock and spread the fertiliser around, because they're great bit of manure. We all know chook manure is fantastic for the pastures and our gardens and things. So the way they are built, they're built just like a caravan really, on wheels, and you tow them behind the tractor, and we can move them. I usually move them between 4 and 7 days all the time. So with that manure that's coming into the ground, and they scratch around and do all that. They do an amazing job scratching and actually putting the manure back into the ground as well. So that's the idea of it. So we can move them around mobile. They're like mobile fertiliser carts, basically.
The Jenkins have 220 acres and they run their chooks over about 180 acres of this. The doors and lights of their 3 mobile chicken houses are solar powered, and the flock is guarded by 2 Maremma dogs, so there is little energy investment. With a maximum of 2,100 chickens at any one time, the farmers are already seeing the benefit to their pastures.
I've noticed in one particular paddock and it's not just due to the chickens, it's probably the way we're grazing now a little bit differently as well, and we're getting huge amounts of clover and good quality clover. It's not being eaten by red-legged earth mites and things like that. There's one paddock, and I'd love to have done the trial, but it did always get hit by red-legged earth mites. This year with the chickens that have run through it, it doesn't seem to have had that problem.
So, could chickens be a weapon against the dreaded red-legged earth mite? Adam has noticed an increase in bugs in his 17 years of farming here, but with the chickens on pest patrol, the Jenkins now have a natural defence system.
We do have issues here with crickets because we've got black cracking clay in some of our paddocks, and the crickets love that because in summer it opens up and the crickets all go down and they'll eat the roots of the pasture. So, and the chooks do like the crickets. I've seen them have a good chase. Mind you, our dachshunds don't mind crickets either. They'll chase them down in the garden. Hastbury Landcare Network have done some great things, and I know there's some really good projects people have done in the region in the past, so I thought there could be some good things for us to learn from it, and a good opportunity for us to sort of commit to a project, I suppose, and take on something different. Yeah. The other thing I'd love to know about and to trial is different feed types for cattle in terms of reducing methane. So that's something that there's a possibility for us to look at that, whether it's through this project or something else, or maybe someone else is trialling it as well, but to get some local knowledge around that would be really good.
The thing I also want to explore is the types of grasses and crops that they are, and what's the perennial annual mix in it, because am I going to have to resow every year, And is that then, to me, is what's something that we can get as a balance that we may not have to resow every year, but because I'm saying, one thing you want to reduce your climate footprint, but I'm dragging the tractor out every year and I'm resowing everything. So I'm going, well, that doesn't solve the problem we sort of set out to do. Might be good for the soil, that's good. But so how do we get a bit of a balance? That's what I'm sort of looking at this project sort of interests me, and saying, yes, a lot of them are annuals, like a lot of the, whether it's your plantains and your turnips and your other things, they are an annual. So what does that look like? Do we have to resow them, which we would, obviously, but what other mixes can you have?
There's so many things, and I think there's so many different experiments and so much research we could do with the free range chickens or the paddock graze system. And even just from the chickens' point of view, we've noticed some of the different paddocks, they seem to lay better in some paddocks than others. But I don't know how, and we're such a small scale, I suppose. Maybe in a few years' time we'll have a bit more data collected, but there's so many great things you could do in terms of, production performance of the chicken, and health and longevity and all that sort of stuff. No different to what you do with a cow when you're measuring cow performance. But then we can also, soil testing and leaf and tissue analysis and things like that, as well as, looking at areas where our chicken vans have been. Sometimes areas underneath where the chicken vans have been gets a bit patchy, just because it's, been out of the sunlight, plus it's had the poop there.
Chicken poo is a fantastic fertiliser, and the Jenkins have not used artificial fertiliser for 2 years now. But it can be too much beneath the mobile hen houses. Adam is keen to find out which species of plants can cope with a nutrient overload and help heal the soil there.
The price of fertiliser is going to go up, which it has this year. The availability and the reserves of it worldwide, that's where my thinking is. Do we need to think about having a mix of systems that we can really tap into? There's no doubt, like the going through the Netherlands, that they've been well and truly restricted on their effluent that they can put out on their paddocks at certain times of year, the amount of NPK and S they can actually use. And now New Zealand, our major competitor, across the ditch, is really looking at changing the way they use nitrogen, because they're getting a lot of pushback on how much nitrogen they can use. So, and that's driven, from an environment point of view, but it's also driven from the consumer and the public. Just saying, hang on, waterways and other things, have we got this right? Now, I know they've got different soils over some of those countries that may leach a lot more than our soils, but it's something that I think we should, as an Australians, keep our eye on.
Both Adam and Cath have observed significant changes in the local climate and have real concerns about the future of farming. Cath has also been the chair of the board for the local CMA, Purrumbete Catchment Management Authority, since 2015.
Being part of the board of the CMA, I've probably become a lot more exposed to the great opportunities and the work that the catchment management authorities do, the role of Landcare on a broader scale, not just in our own little region. Some of the advocacy work that gets done too around some of the different organisations, and just, I suppose, thinking about the catchment as a whole. In terms of what happens here, what we do on our farm, and the flow-on effect. It's probably just given me a greater appreciation to some of the issues that there are in the catchment, and the importance of landholders, the flow-on effect of landholders doing improvements on their farm, looking after the natural assets.
I have seen this. I've seen the seasons break. The autumn breaks have tended to be later and later. Now we do sometimes get an early one, but it has changed a lot. And talking to the guys and girls around here that have been particularly here for a long, long time, even they get worried about the system. Now, this last 2 years has been a lot wetter, but I only have to cast their mind back 2 years before that, and there wasn't a bale of hay on the eastern seaboard that you'd get. We were that short of fodder. So that's the thing that concerns me, and that's because we're getting a shorter start to the season, so we're getting a later autumn break, and sometimes our springs are shutting out, a little bit like this year. This spring was wetter, but then they shut off early. And so you're not getting that fodder captured for your livestock and stuff going into those tricky seasons.
My concerns in relation to climate change for our business and our farm and our family is just the challenges that it poses in terms of fire risk. I suppose that would be probably the number one thing. We've had a bunch of thunderstorms through here and fires. We are in a fire-prone area as we back onto the stony rises, plus with sort of grasslands and things like that. So I suppose trying to mitigate that risk, that's something I think about. But probably more climate change, my concerns are at a regional level for the natural assets, I suppose, waterways, species, native species, degradation of those kind of things. That's where my concern lies, and the ongoing concern and how that impacts humans.
We walked straight into the 2006 drought, which the people around here reckon was probably one of the worst droughts they've had in 100 years. And we had no relationships with fodder growers. We didn't have hardly any hay. I think we cut like 80 bales off the whole 430 acres at the time that it was. So that was a challenge, and we saw that. We did see that. We didn't see it as bad as that, but we did see some challenges throughout our way. And we're self-sufficient. We're on a pretty self-sufficient type of farming system here, where we did cut most of our own fodder and silage and things like that. So hay and silage was all done home. We imported a little bit, but not a huge amount. We tried to run a system that's pretty reliant to probably minimise that risk. but we did see that risk getting higher and higher. There's some pretty tough years there that our fodder just didn't happen. That 2006 year was the year which took advantage of our big dam, which is 30 megalitres. It was down to the last size of a swimming pool, a bit more, which is then I took the advantage of getting an excavator in and actually just cleaning it out and actually taking it a little bit longer and wider, so we sort of capture that water for the farm. So that was definitely a challenge. Water is definitely a challenge. Yeah.
The Jenkins have 4 children, 3 girls and a boy who at 12 is the youngest member of the family. Adam told me that while none of them were very keen on the dairy business, they are all involved with the eggs and have an interest in the land, especially their eldest daughter, who is planning to do a regenerative agricultural course at a university in New South Wales. I asked Cath what her kids did on the farm and how they felt about climate change.
They get concerned about it from a, would you believe, a policy point of view, in terms of, it's so obvious to them that there's more to do at a global scale, I suppose, or a national scale. So, yeah, they get a bit frustrated by that side of it. But I think, too, they're such a different generation to us. They've grown up with iPhones or iPads, as they've had those as long as they can remember. So the climate change conversation, I think, is similar. It's just part of the conversation. So while I think they're concerned about it, it's a conversation they're used to hearing. We didn't wear seatbelts until someone thought, we could do something about this. They're a big part of the business. They all parts of the farm business too. They help us move cows. They'll get in the tractor and feed out hay if need be. They'll go and collect eggs. The egg business gets pretty intensive at certain times of the week, depending on whether we're packing eggs, delivering eggs, feeding chooks, what have you. And they're all able to help out and do all of the things that need to get done, which is really great. We've had plenty of times when we've been out in the egg room, we call it, we've got music playing and we're, arguing, laughing, singing, having fun out there, or getting sick of each other. But yeah, it's a big team effort.
Cath and Adam are both from farming backgrounds and both studied agricultural subjects at university. Adam also won a Nuffield Scholarship in 2011, which enabled him to travel overseas and examine board structures in farming businesses. He discovered that the more diversity of people on the board, the more successful the company. With all this experience, it's no wonder the couple have been running a farm advisory business for the past 2 years. And always keen to try something new, in 2020 they set aside a small portion of land next to their main dam as a campsite. At $30 per night, this enterprise provides welcome extra cash, but for the couple, the most important thing is for others, especially city folk, to see how a farm is run. The camping paddock is where the mixed species crop was sown in April 2022, at a rate of 55 kilos per hectare. I asked Jay Caloran, our climate resilient farms agronomist, what she had decided to put in the mix and why.
So we've made up a mix for Cath and Adam Jenkins for their chickens to graze on, and then their cattle. So the mix has to be chicken and then cow friendly to a certain extent. So it's still quite a diverse mix. There was nothing really that I suggested in this multi-species mix, which has most of my more favourite species within it, that they were worried about from a chicken point of view. So it's got 20 kilos of oats, and that's for fibre and bulk, and the chickens will certainly eat some of that, and then the cattle will come through and eat the rest of it, the tall stuff that's too hard for the chickens to reach. There's 15 kilos of vetch, which I think the chickens will eat quite a lot of the leaves off the vetch. There's 7.5 kilos of annual ryegrass, which is just to fill in the gaps, but certainly very chicken and cow friendly. There's 2 types of clover in there. Again, I saw my chickens eating some clover out in the paddock today, or this morning, so I think that would be fine. There's some fodder rape and tillage radish, some plantain and leafy turnip, which again I've spotted my own chickens foraging around in the yard for, so I think that they will be quite happy, the Jenkins chickens, to have those species in there. And then there's leafy turnip, chicory and linseed. So a lot of it is for fodder production, but certainly with the linseed is purely for soil health reasons. Chicory and plantain also have large taproots, and they'll do a lot for soil health. The brassicas will give us, again, taproots as well, and the clovers will fix nitrogen as well as the vetch. So we've got a lot of bulk legume fixing taprooted species, and that's also in response to the paddock conditions as well. It's a medium to heavy soil type, and definitely needs renovation. So these species together will help fix nitrogen and cycle nutrients and open up the paddock as well. So it's a three-way intersection, this mix of chicken and cow forage, and then addressing some of the soil constraints in the paddock. The linseed is not very palatable. It's a small little slim upright plant, and doesn't look like much, and doesn't give much for the forage for the animal. It's not particularly palatable, but from a soil health point of view, it hosts mycorrhizal fungi, which are one of the key soil biological populations that we'd like to increase, and it also releases phosphorus from an autumn-winter growth perspective. So we like to see it I like to see it in the mixes because of those factors rather than any real livestock palatability. I advised Cath and Adam to do a bit of tillage because the paddock hasn't really been cultivated much before, so there'll need to be some level of tillage to get rid of there's a little bit of root mat, and the soil is a bit pugged because it is a wetter farm. So there needs to be a bit of tillage to provide a nice seed bed, and then the seeds can be sown in. For this type of mix, it's mainly at that 55 or sometimes it's 60 kilos depending, because we've got large seeds in that mix. So the oats and vetch in particular, your cereals and your bigger legumes have quite a large seed, so that's where the higher sowing rate is. So for example, if it was another autumn sown mix without any cereals such as your oats and your winter wheat or vetch, it would be a lot lower sowing rate. It might be between 20 and 30 kilos instead of nearly 60. So it just depends whether there's cereals in there, and they're in there for fodder and because the paddock doesn't get too wet. So I like to include them because I think that they're it adds diversity, and they're good bulky feeds as such for livestock, whether that be chickens or cattle, but they only thrive to a certain extent when it gets too wet. So they're for light to medium soils which don't get too waterlogged.
I was interested to see ryegrass in the mix. Ryegrass has been king of pasture crops for decades. Won't it dominate the others? Not if planted strategically and in moderation, Jade told me.
There should be enough in it that it will fill in all the gaps between the other plants in the mix. And as the oats are grazed off, there'll come a certain point in time when the oats don't come back. They might take 2 or 3 grazings of the cattle. I don't know how much the chickens will predate upon them, but certainly 2 or 3 grazings with cattle or sheep will probably see the oats finished. So the annual ryegrass is there to take up the burden later in the year when the oats start to finish off. So 7 kilos is a little bit less than a third of the normal sowing rate of a ryegrass. An annual ryegrass normally goes in at about 25. Sometimes people do 30. So 7 or 7.5 kilos is probably enough to fill in the gaps, but hopefully not too much that it will dominate. I quite like vetch in a spring and an autumn sowing because it's quite vigorous, especially if it's sown early in the autumn and it can get up and get going before it gets too cold. And part of the sowing rate, the higher sowing rate for the vetch, is because the seed is a lot larger than a clover seed. And it's also because I like to see a reasonable amount of it in the mix. So it tends to get up and out of the ground and start fixing nitrogen a little bit earlier than our clovers. So I like to see it in at a fair proportion of the mix so that nitrogen fixation happens as early as possible to feed the crop. That's probably the other reason that I didn't mention before is why vetch is in the mix, because compared to a clover, it's a lot less likely to be impacted by redlegs and our other biting and sucking insects. So in terms of nitrogen fixation, it might survive, whereas the clovers may or may not, depending on insect attack.
Chicory and plantain. not only have great root systems, but have been shown to decrease worms in animals that eat them. That is to say, they're anthelmintic, natural wormers. Added to that, chicory stalks provide perfect scaffolds for spider webs, natural traps for unwanted insects. And the stunning blue chicory flowers will be an added attraction for any campers arriving on the Jenkins property. Now we just have to see how the cows and chickens like it. I left the Jenkins farm with a dozen fresh eggs and my head full of chattering chooks. Amazing how the sound of clucking inside their caravan reminded me of a seabird colony on a Scottish cliff. Mobile hen houses are not new, but their designs have changed over the centuries. A Google search provided me with a number of 19th century adverts for horse-drawn sheds. Today, a tractor can pull all kinds of contemporary designs, including the wackiest one that I found, sheds in the shape of giant eggs. In ordinary free-range egg businesses, the chooks are confined to one site, while this lot get to roam over 180 acres and have a weekly change of venue for their sleeping quarters. I know which kind of free-range chook I'd rather be. And now, with a larger variety of plants to dine on, they may well be the happiest commercial egg layers in southwest Victoria.